We're calling the meeting to order. If you have not signed in, please sign in to the sheets over there. I want to make a motion as we start off. Well, before we do, let's have make sure everybody is still here. Roll call. Frank Thorwald.
Stephen Cooper.
Bill Feyerabend.
Dale Nations.
We have a quorum. We can move forward. I would like to make a motion for a modification of the agenda and put the motion for the meetings at the end so that our counsel from the Attorney General's office can get out of here early.
And just for information, I have a meeting at 12 o'clock. Mr. Cantrell from my office is also an Assistant Attorney General will step in my place for the period of time that I'm gone to ensure that there is coverage from the Attorney General's office through the entire meeting.
Okay. We have a second. All in favor say aye.
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 And now
Any opposed? Okay, we've moved on past that. Plug and abandonment by Suncor, number 120.
This is also going to be a motion for reconsideration.
Okay, and we need to have a motion for reconsideration on this. On the plug and abandonment by Suncor, number 120-24 and number 1-19. Do I have
move reconsider.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? The motion carries. Dennis, do you want to start us off on this?
Okay, well, I'm going to summarize the issue as I understand it, and it's spelled out on the screen there under item 3, plug and abandonment. Suncor disagrees with one portion of the letter that was sent to them on the 31st of January in regards to filling the well bore with plugging mud below the cast iron or steel bridge plugs in both wells, which were going to be at 2,100 feet. They are asking the commission to reconsider that instead of plugging mud, that it just be the brine or the water that's in the well there now. Everything else remains unchanged.
Do you want to do a little discussion of why or what the effect is, Dennis, from your understanding?
Yeah, also wanted to ask, were we going to invite Suncor or Sunbelt Holdings to the table to discuss any details?
Well, I thought we'd let you discuss a little more of what the overall concept is for the board.
Okay.
And then we will invite them to come forward.
All right, so anyway, the rules for plug and abandoning in Arizona are, forgive me, but a rather cookie cutter approach. They're very old. And as some of you may be aware, I'm on a mission to open up a rulemaking docket eventually and revise rules, which would include the plug and abandonment to make them a little more adaptable and diverse to the different conditions that we run into in drilling in Arizona, which is still pretty simple compared to places like maybe Texas or Overthrust Bell or deep Tuscaloosa Trend in the Gulf Coast or whatever, where you have all the different pressure issues. Nevertheless, the original intent of the letter that was sent out on the 31st to Sunbelt was that you follow the rule requirements, which is that whatever part of the well is not plugged with cement should be filled with plugging mud per what the rule requires. Sunbelt thinks that that's a little bit too much and asks for just the well bore to remain with water. In part of my ongoing research, therefore, I went back to some of my sources I've been talking to about just general concepts of plug and abandonment and related issues. And what I realized is that we have LPG underground storage facilities in the state that are in the same salt body, in fact, that these two wells were drilled in. And none of them have been plug and abandoned. But typically, when you plug and abandon a well that's in a salt cavern, you fill the well bore above the salt, the top of the salt, with cement because you're trying to protect the freshwater aquifers above the salt. But you don't fill the well below it or the salt cavern below it entirely with drilling with plugging mud. You just leave the brine in place, and that should suffice. I reached out to a couple of different experts. One's a regulatory person in the state of Michigan, and another one is a corporate manager nationwide in the United States for cavern storage that this company does all over the United States, including a lot of underground storage in Louisiana. And they, independent of each other, both said that it's really not necessary to fill a well like this with plugging mud, and that if the well is permanently capped off at the top with salt and filled with cement above it, the well bore below can remain in the condition it's in now, which would be with water, I think, or brine. So my recommendation to the commission, you have two choices. You can stick with the existing rule and what we put in the letter, which is fill a well bore with mud below the cast iron or steel bridge plug. Or number two is allow them to just place the bridge plug at 2,100 feet and leave the well bore underneath, below that, just filled with water. And I would invite for any other discussion that Sunbelt or its consultant may have regarding that.
Do we have a representative of Sunbelt here?
Yes. Yes. And,
Please come forward and identify yourself.
Kevin Eager, Southwest Groundwater Consultants. And I mean, I would agree with that analysis that, and I think as we had left it when we were here the last time, is that the concern to the state is that interface between the saltwater body, the salt water, and the freshwater zone above. And I think at the time too, we were concerned about what is open in an open hole. How do you confirm that you fill a hole that is open and has possibly collapsed? And I thought that was the concurrence that we all had. So I do agree with that evaluation that there really is no important reason other than the fact that it says that in the regulation to fill below that plug.
Okay.
So,
Any questions? Any discussion on this issue?
Just a question. So Sunbelt, what are they, as far as the plugging, what is it that Sunbelt is asking us to do?
Instead of filling with a plugging mud below that bridge plug, it's basically going to be left open. Salt water, brine. We're basically going to install a steel bridge plug at 2,100 feet, and then we're going to grout up with a cement slurry to within 10 feet or whatever we all agreed upon. Then remove the surface and mark it appropriately. So in essence, it's all the same, except it's not going to be filling that portion below the bridge plug with a plugging mud.
This is Dale. Excuse me.
Go ahead, Dale.
I'm sorry. Got a congestion. Can somebody from Sunbelt tell me what it would cost to fill these holes with plugging mud? We're not talking about filling a cavern. Has that been calculated?
You're talking about the cost of filling below the bridge plug, 2,100 to 6,000 feet?
Yes.
We have not calculated that cost.
Okay. Well, considering Dennis's research on this, I think he's established that industry procedures would allow just leaving salt water in the hole below the bridge plug. So I would move to grant that request.
Dale?
Bill.
I mean.
I've got his congestion. Bill Fireoven. So looking at it as a geologist, I think of salt bodies can be very plastic and move around and fill voids. Plugging below, I don't worry about it so much, but from the bridge up is, protecting the freshwater aquifers is what would concern me. And I'm fine with filling it up, but my question again, focusing on protecting the freshwater aquifers, does this well have an existing casing in it?
Yes, it does.
So you're proposing to fill within the casing from the bridge up?
Correct.
What about from the casing to the drill hole wall? How are we, because I would focus right on that particular point for protecting freshwater aquifers. And I want to, that's the point I would like to focus on, is from the casing to the drill wall. And what information do we have? Dennis, do you have anything on that?
That speaks to the second bullet there. Yeah, that speaks to the second bullet in number 3 on the screen there, which I want to discuss with the commission. Valid question. I wanted to, I guess, reaffirm that Sunbelt understands it's vital that the cement bond between casing and formation be intact all the way to the surface, or in your case 10 feet below the surface, because that's where a lot of your potential for communication is also. The other half of that is that there is integrity in the casing, that it's not going to that's going to hold up under a simple pressure test, not a mechanical integrity test like you do in a cavern, but there is a pressure test. And I expressed that in the letter. I hope it was clear. I know that you came in or had an assistant come in and review the file, because I think what we talked about last time was seeing if you could find enough documentation to satisfy the commission, short of having to run a cement pond log in both wells or a pressure test on the casing. So did you find what you need, and can you demonstrate to the commission satisfactorily?
We did find information on the cement logging that was done in 1-19. We were not able to find anything in 1-24.
And that's what I was worried about. So. And
it's hard for us to imagine that the folks that were doing this work, they were doing it, the same company was doing 1-24, 1-12, and 1-19. The records are intact for 1-19. Unfortunately, they're not there for 1-24. It's not to say that they did not conduct that cement bath. I would assume they did. It's just, for whatever reason, the records, as you had indicated in the past, Dennis, those records are not complete. So it's our feeling that they were done for 1-24. It's just nobody has a record of it. It's just hard for me to imagine that they would have done something efficiently on one and not on the other, when they were all being done within the same relative time period.
It's my recollection that the cement bond logs that exist were run in 2009, both for the Cackerley and the 1-19.
Okay.
And that would give it 10 years since any cement bond log has been done. I don't know what the consensus is in industry. Maybe one of the commission members has an opinion, but I don't know what the consensus is in industry, whether that's too long a time, you should run another cement bond log, or not.
This is Bill Feyerabend, we've got a lot of experience sitting out in the audience. Can we ask the audience if somebody has experience and opinions they'd like to toss out on addressing this particular issue?
Well, I would not mind.
Identify yourself first, please.
My name is James.
Come forward, please, so we can.
My name is James Ballard. I'm not affiliated with any of the oil companies making application here. I'm pro bono, just a citizen. But I do have 36 years experience in the oil and gas industry, and I would say it would be pretty unusual to not trust a bond log for a period of time. After all, you're going to abandon the well for the next 100 years, and they will have had one bond log. But it is unfortunate the documentation is not complete for the other well. Obviously, you can infer, but that may not be adequate to remove the uncertainty in the commission's mind that that well also has a good cement bond. I don't know how critical the aquifer issues are in this area, but if they are, then I would say you don't have enough information.
There are a number of freshwater wells in, I'll call it the region. They're not right juxtaposed to these particular wells in question, but in that area of the valley, most of them are used for livestock or for irrigation, but they're a little bit high in TDS or even in salt. So I don't know that we want to drink it without running it through an RO system. Or
Here's one of the issues in Arizona. All water in aquifers is considered drinking water. Yeah. It must meet aquifer water quality standards.
Which they do meet aquifer water quality standards.
There is an exception if someone makes a request of the director of ADEQ for a modification of application of the standard. Has not happened. I know it hasn't happened in that area, so that even if the water in an aquifer is brine, even if it has TCPC in it, if it is pumped to the surface and used, it has to meet aquifer water quality standards as part of its treatment.
And in Arizona, the requirements for plugging and abandoning well don't specifically include the documentation of the cement bond law?
Well, they do, actually. It says that there has to be evidence of casing integrity, and in the words of the rule, it says evidence of a successful cement squeeze, et cetera, et cetera. I can read it if you need it, but what that translates to me is making sure that the cement behind casing is intact. Cement squeeze has to be squeezing off the perforations, assuming that they're in production, but this was a stratigraphic test. There were no perforations.
I have a
This is
question.
Dale.
Oh, Dale has
Thank you.
one.
Go ahead, Dale.
I have a question. I think it would certainly be industry standards when the casing is set, surface casing down to even intermediate, that cement has to be circulated between through the annulus between the well, maybe that's not the right word, but between the casing and the drill wall, lithologic wall. Isn't that the case?
Yes, that's
When you set the casing, you have to cement it.
Yeah, the annular space has to be filled with cement, and they have to have, the best evidence they have is that the cement, when it's being pumped down there, returns to the surface. So
Right.
multiple runs of casing, each time the cement's got to return to surface.
The
Yeah, so
problem is
I think it would be safe to assume that during the drilling process, that had to be completed, whether we have the cement log or not.
Well, there might be something in the file. Did you notice any documentation about showing the cement circulated return to surface?
Not on 124, but on 119, I mean, it's been about a week or so since I've looked at it, but I mean, it seems like everything that needed to be there was there.
Well, the nice thing is sometimes the previous administrator had a videotape which he stored in an electronic file, and I looked for it and didn't find it on these wells, but the operator would have a camera and show when the cement returned to the surface. And he'd keep a copy of the MP3 or whatever it is, the file in the public record electronically, but we don't have that for this.
Is there any post-production or post-in-place casing and cement tests that could be run today to determine if the cement casing in the annular space has failed, or is it still protecting the individual lithography or the individual levels of
I mean, I think there are some methods of logging that can be done. I haven't really explored all. I know they do it in the mining industry. I have not explored what those methods are and how well they would work in this instance.
Well, I might suggest, or repeat the suggestion that was in the letter, of the company that ran all the logs in the first place was Schlumberger. They may even have a record of, I don't know if they do that, but they may have a record of it. But they may be able to provide you some additional technical advice on what other supplement tests that Mr. Zeiss was talking about.
And
That's
if
what
I
I've
can,
done in the past.
It consulted Schlumberger or the logging company.
If I'm looking, doing a workup of an area,
that's Gordon LeBlanc was speaking.
Yes.
it is, and this was what, 2000?
2009. And
I mean, that's recent.
If
so they
anybody's
should
speaking,
have-
if they could come up here and speak, because we're recording this. Bill, you had something you wanted to say earlier, a question.
Yeah, again, it was a question for some of the technical people we have here. Is there a method that, since in this one well, we're separating, okay? We've got one well that you've got the documentation. My understanding is we're fine with that. We have another well with no documentation, so we're kind of trying to decide how to handle that situation. In that well that we're still trying to decide, are there methods within the industry, like you can send down something and drill through or blow through or explode through, do something to test the casing and the cement where we could get some sense of warm and fuzzies that are geophysical, you know, the.
Jim Ballard again.
Please come forward. This mic is not going to
There
pick
could
you up.
be some unique elements to the wall, to the well, that would make it difficult or maybe even possible, but in general, you can always run a cement bomb log.
Yeah,
You
it's
can
my
run what?
underst-
You can always run what was lost, a cement bomb log,
Okay.
but that does cost money.
My understanding is, just to back up what Mr. Ballard said, in case of cement integrity, a cement bond log is the way to go. The alternative to a formal pressure test in casing integrity, there may be some other methods I'm not that familiar with. I've heard there are things that might be cheaper that can be substituted for that. But basically, cement bond log is the state of the art or whatever.
And that will focus on the issue that you're concerned about.
It focuses on the main issue, for sure.
If I could just add one point, I mean, it's Schlumberger is the company that did the cementing in, we know in 1-19, we would assume it was done in 1-24. I mean, I think the industry recognizes Schlumberger as being a.
Well, Schlumberger is a logging company. I don't know that they did the cement job. I think the driller would have done the cement
Yeah.
job at the time they were installing casing.
But Schlumberger, I think, was the one who was doing
Ran the
it.
log.
Yeah.
And
Dale.
If they had a record of it,
Yes,
it might be worth pursuing.
You have a motion on the table, for modifying the ruling we made in January. Do you want to withdraw that or modify that motion?
I don't recall what it was.
It was with respect to the plugging. Dennis had suggested, and Sunbelt had agreed with it. The proper way to plug this, and you had made agreed with it and made a motion that we do that.
Here, let me
That we require mud in the
No,
well? Yeah, I would withdraw that or modify it to say that we would allow them to leave salt water in the drill hole below the bridge plug.
For which well?
Well, I would say on both of them. I'm confident that they, when setting casing, they must have had to cement it in place.
We have two different issues for consideration. The first is with number one, are we going to accept the data for 119 for 124, and the alternative require a cement bond log. The second issue is modification of paragraph number 3 in the Turner letter of January 31st, 2018, which talks about below the cast iron bridge plug, the entire wellbore shall be filled with plugging mud. Those are the two separate issues up right now. And so, because there may be a difference in opinion in the two, my suggestion is we break them apart and start with the one that I think we probably have consensus on, which is modification of paragraph number 3 of the letter of January 31st, 2018. And
Yeah, I don't have that before me.
so my suggestion would be to word it something like this. Make reference back to the Turner letter of January 31st, 2018 on behalf of the Oil and Gas Commission, paragraph number 3, which states below the CIBP, the entire wellbore shall be filled with plugging mud at a minimum weight specified in R12-7-127D, and it should be modified to state that below the CIBP, which is the cast iron bridge plug, the entire wellbore shall be left open, or shall be left in its current state with either salt brine or water, but still require the contractor to seal the well above the cast iron bridge plug, something along those lines.
Yes.
But my suggestion would be a board member may want to read that in the record.
Dennis, do you want to put that in the record?
Or not Dennis.
Dale.
Dale.
Sorry. I
Oh, yes. Yes, if you could do that, just put that statement from Rick into the record and say that modification of that earlier rule.
Is the board ready to vote in that manner, or would they rather have Mr. Cooper, who's got the letter in front of him, make a statement?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Mr. Cooper.
we have reconsidered this matter before us, and we still have the prior motion that was approved. I would submit that basically that motion that was approved at the January 12, 2018 meeting had essentially 11 stipulations which were spelled out in the letter from the Oil and Gas Commission to Sunbelt Holdings dated January 31, 2018. I would submit that that's paragraph 3 in that letter of January 31, 2018 be modified. Specifically, the first sentence would be modified that it would read that we would delete below the cast iron bridge plug the entire wellbore be filled with plugging mud at a minimum weight specified in section R12-7-127D of the Arizona Administrative Code. That sentence be amended to reflect that below the cast iron bridge plug that it shall be left in its current state with salt, brine, or water, but require the entire wellbore shall be filled with plugging cement to the surface.
Dale, do you accept that modification to your motion?
Well, no, you can't say the entire wellbore. The wellbore above the bridge plug. Otherwise, I agree with that.
I did say above the cast iron bridge.
Oh, did you?
Yes, I
I'm
did.
sorry, I
Yeah,
misheard it.
here.
So, Dale, do you accept that modification to your motion?
Yes, I do.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The ayes carry. The motion moves.
Oh, and I'd like to say another thing about that. I want to commend Dennis for doing the research to allow us to figure this out.
All right, we have one other issue which has to do with if there's a determination of the casing integrity within 1-24. However,
If I could just add, we did talk about this. I did have this conversation with Dennis. In lieu of a cast iron bridge plug, we were looking at putting in a steel bridge plug.
Is it cheaper? What was your rationale for that?
The cast iron bridge plug, from what our understanding and our research, is that it's designed in oil and gas wells where if they go in and they drill, they may want to go back later and re-drill and reopen that borehole because for whatever reason they may want to re-explore or reevaluate. It's a very technical piece of equipment that's designed to allow you to go back through. Our thought is we were going to put in a steel plug, and they were going to. It's a corrugated casing with a steel bottom plate. They put it in place at 2,100 feet. They applied 350,000 pounds of pressure to expand it. It seals it. It's never going anywhere, and then we grout to the surface from there. To within 10 feet.
I don't have an opinion either way. The cast iron, speaking from my well experience, no, I can't imagine anybody wanting to re-enter this well for any other reason than to repair some kind of damage or some other issue that crops up way down the line. But
In our proposal,
who knows whether that's going to happen? They're not going to re-enter the well because they want to retest the zone and produce oil from it or that kind of thing. So.
Any other discussion on this?
Yeah, this is Dale. I think it's irrelevant whichever plug they want to use.
Dale, this is Rick Zeiss from Attorney General's office. Our problem is the letter of January 31st, 2018 specifically identifies a cast iron bridge plug.
Oh.
And so what the problem is, as we just modified it, as the Commission just modified the first sentence of paragraph number 3, you may have to modify, because it's an order of the Commission, you should modify item number 2 and number 3 to be steel rather than cast iron.
Is there any more discussion?
I so move to do that.
or a permanent bridge plug.
Dale, you want to specify what you move to do?
To delete the requirement that they use a cast iron bridge plug. Just to say that there's use another term for a permanent bridge plug.
Are you saying, I think we need to be specific, whether it's cast iron or steel as a permanent bridge plug, if you could state that.
Well, then I would say let them use the steel bridge plug that they're proposing. Change the wording to allow that.
Or would it be better to allow flexibility?
Steel.
Either. In other words.
Dale, Dennis brought up something to ask. Would it be better to give them the flexibility to use either steel or cast iron? Is there any discussion from any of the other commissioners on this?
Yeah, that was my first suggestion. Allow either one.
And just use a generic term, permanent.
Yes.
Any discussion? Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
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 All opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries.
I think that takes care of the issues of item number 3, the plug and abandon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Are we going to discuss the issue of the basically from the casing to the well wall now?
The
that's
logging.
true.
We have to do that.
To me, that's the point I
That's-
focus on, really, to protect all.
Well, I specifically phrased that third agenda item to be, I wanted to have a discussion, and I wanted to make sure that the commission understood my concerns. I don't know if it needs a vote or not. From what I heard from one member of the public, I guess there isn't a need to be overly concerned about the absence of a cement bond log in that third well, and because it's probably still the same as the day it was submitted.
Well, my point was,
Maybe I should talk.
if there's a specific requirement for you to approve a plug and abandon and everyone involved, then they may have not fulfilled that task, so it can be required. But I don't think it is a really major source of concern. I think you can get some documentation from Schlumberger. They don't have an actual copy of the law, they have a copy of paid for or that it's not been.
I think it is.
Yeah, and that's true. That's correct. And I phrased the letter such that I kind of left it up to the operator to provide whatever evidence needs to satisfy the commission that the cement is intact behind the casing. In the case of the 121, I think it was, that's what's in doubt. The other well, the 19, is not an issue. So, and that's why I tried to work in there that perhaps Schlumberger would be someone you consult and get some expert opinion on that kind of thing, and then just provide a statement back to the commission what your findings are. And if Schlumberger comes back and says that this would be just a hypothetical example, if Schlumberger comes back and says we think that you don't have to worry about the cement being intact because the file shows there's enough evidence that it was recirculated back from the surface and the other well was done exactly the same way, so you're good to go, then you could write us to that effect. If on the other hand, Schlumberger comes back and says standard industrial practice is that you run a cement bond log every 5 years, which I don't know if it is, I'm just making it up as an example, then you should communicate that to the commission.
Dennis, look at item number 1. I think this issue is covered in item 1 there.
Ensure that no end space in each well extends above the top of salt to the surface through any casing string. To document this condition to the satisfaction of the commission, recommended method is to either run a cement bond log or casing integrity log. That's for the pressure part. Cement and casing integrity may be determined by existing or new cement bond logs or other evidence that the well is sealed from the surrounding formations and aquifers and from the loop salt body below. So that was item number 1 in the letter, which is what was driving point number 3, agenda 3, third bullet.
We've already covered it then.
Yeah, and I'm kind of leaving it up to you to demonstrate that.
So Dennis, what you were saying is, and I know Sunbelt is looking forward to move on 1.19 as quickly as possible, so we can provide the revised application or new application for that. We will make contact with Schlumberger to get their opinions on the 1-24, and we can present that to you that information to you with an application for 1-24 as.
Yeah,
as
I think that should work. If they say, though, they strongly recommend that you run another cement bond log, then I think you should. But I did not want to write something out here as absolutely I agree that you have to do it this way, because it may in fact be redundant.
Right,
Be a
and
waste of money.
we can certainly, we'll have that discussion with Schlumberger and representatives of Schlumberger, and we'll provide that in our, I mean, if they say we don't think it's an issue, we will provide that
Yeah.
information in our application.
That works for me. It
So-
should work for the commission.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you need a motion or anything
I
for
don't believe so,
permission
no.
for 119 with the, but not for 121, or are we just good to
I
go?
think that, to me, that's all wrapped up in the concept behind number 1 of the
Okay,
letter.
that's fine.
Okay, then let's move on to number 4. Dennis, do you want to talk to us about ranger development here?
Thank you, gentlemen.
Well, yeah, I kind of mixed up my agenda a little bit. I said drilling progress on the 33-3, 34-3, and future plans. That was just to say that Ranger has completed the drilling of those 2 wells. I guess we're still kind of hanging fire if you're going to want to temporarily abandon them or further testing. Did you want to speak to us about your intent there at this time? I know that you submitted the sundry notices that we talked about. I got that stuff.
Tony Hines, Ranger. Just for an update, we did drill the 2 wells that's listed there, the 33-3 and the 34-3. We did not find any commercial gas in the Shinnerup in those wells. They were dry. Those wells are currently shut in at this point with a cap on them. The thought process that we have on those, we'll be actually proposing officially, per the rules, to ask for an official shut-in to temporarily abandon or shut in whatever's appropriate for those 2 wells. What we're looking at is there's still a potential that those 2 wells could actually be deepened maybe in the future if everybody gets hot on the Supai formation, or they could actually be used as injection wells for disposal of water into the Coconino. We also have the Hortenstein 1-35 well that we took over that has that same potential on that. After the contractor drilled the 33-3 well, first he drilled the 34 well, then he went to the 33 well. After that, we drilled the 28-1 well. It's not listed there, but it was over on Navajo Springs. They did find commercial gas that tested 137, so we have a shut-in well over there awaiting a pipeline over in the 28-1. So that's just kind of an update of our activity there.
Any questions for Tony?
What I guess I will do is I will present to the commission at the next meeting for approval of temporary abandonment. If that's in fact what they're going to do. The commission has to, by form of the commission, the rule says, has to determine or grant them temporary abandonment for up to 5 years. So
Thank you, Dennis.
April 6th.
Thank you, Dennis.
The next, unless there's further discussion, I want to move on to the first bullet underneath number 4.
We wanted to, it's Tony Hines with Ranger again, we wanted to open the discussion on how do we, or what procedure is necessary to officially change the spacing for the Shinnerup formation. We have a lot of work, as you all know, on location exceptions and things that take up a lot of time and extra effort on people, and we think there's enough information based on our drilling at the Pinta Dome, specifically on the Shinnerup formation, that maybe we need to officially say that the wells could be drilled on 40-acre spacings even. Because there's so many of these wells, well, some of them are really close to the line, which wouldn't even fall in a 40-acre spacing offset, but the majority of them, would actually fall within the spacing, and therefore we wouldn't need to take up the commission's time all the time coming to a hearing for a location exception because they're gas wells and in a 640. Got professional geologist here. We got a few maps. I don't know if you'll want to see the information or if you how y'all would like to proceed about what do we do. I mean, we think it's pretty obvious. Downspacing would benefit everybody, not just us, all the other contractors or producers to promote development, save time, speed things up, to change spacing, just on the Shinnerup formation only, because that's where we have this evidence of kind of a fluvial, river system that's moving all over, and you can move 100 feet and you might hit a channel or you might not. And,
I have a question on this. This
Dale, go ahead.
That's legit. That's geologically very sound, because the Shinnerup is lenticular, and it is a remote river system, several of them. So it makes sense to do that. My question is, how do you define? Do you have geophysical evidence now of the location of thick accumulations of Shinnerup from one place to another?
I'll invite Kurt Constanius to address that issue. He's much more familiar with the geology, specifics of the geology in the area.
Hi Dale, it's Kurt Constanius.
Hi Kurt.
So we've acquired geophysical data on Pinadome, and my answer to your question is it's below the seismic resolution of what we can see. And most of the channels that we're seeing, in the Shinnerup Formation, we see three depositional sequences. We call them S1, S2, and S3. So there's three stacked series of channel complexes. The sands in general are certainly less than 20 feet thick, and normally they range between 9 and 16 feet thick. And that's part of the issue. So the answer to your question is that no, we cannot image them geophysically.
So once you establish a trend of, say, a Shinnerup channel from subsurface information and projections, of course, that's somewhat guesswork, but then you could plan your drilling program to follow that channel rather than to be limited by spacing rules. Is that pretty much what you're planning?
That's correct. So the 40-acre spacing, it allows a more systematic way to approach the channels. So for instance, if you drill, we know we have evidence that channels are separated sometimes by less than 1,000 feet.
Yeah.
Sort of a nominal channel width is somewhere between 300 and 800 feet, at least at Pinadome. That may vary in the Shinnerup and other areas. But so therefore, if we were to go to quarter section spacing, for instance, if we had a good well like our 33-1, then you could surround that on the offsetting 40-acre sections, and then you would have probably a series of successes and failures depending on whether the presence or absence of the sand.
Yeah, and then you would have developed a trend.
Correct. Yep. At present, we can't. Due to sort of the random nature, we've been pursuing a strategy of offsetting wells that were existing, and they don't really provide any sort of systematic way to pursue defining a trend.
Yeah. Yeah, you're finding in the subsurface just what you see on the surface, where the Shinnerup is exposed.
Funny how that happens. So.
Right. Okay, I'm satisfied with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, I had two items. One is a question. Could we be talking about unitization? And because I think what you're looking at, or what I hear you're asking for, is basically, and it's my words, not yours. So clarify if I'm not accurate here. But what it sounds like you're asking for is a waiver to the usual, what's become routine for us, well spacing exception cycle, public hearing and notice and all that. You want kind of an approval to be able to go out and do offset drilling on these 40-acre spacings or 160-foot spacings. And it's hit or miss. If you find a Shinnerup that's producing, great. If not, you move on. But would unitizing this field achieve that end? Or I've not been through a unitizing exercise. It may be really onerous, but it would certainly get you out of these constant public hearings that you have to go through.
Yeah, I would certainly agree with that. This is Dale. That has occurred to me. Well, maybe unitization would be the answer here.
It's a question for everybody, not
Yep.
not just Mr. Hines, but it's just a question. I'm not pressuring anybody to do anything.
That could, Dale, there's Tony Hines, Ranger. That could maybe solve it, and I hesitate to say that is, we were looking probably for something a lot more broad. Just in general, we know the system. I think we all know the system was something, like this whole river system that's in, eastern Arizona. And it's not just us, it would be any acreage, anywhere. Well, you wouldn't want to go in through a unitization deal. Unitization is really more once you have the production, the geology, who's producing what, then you group everybody up by the unitization to make more sense for economic recovery of an existing pool.
But that makes sense.
We're just looking more towards it takes a lot of time to have to go do the hearings when, people, could just be poking holes, and then once we finally get enough holes, we can address whether we need to unitize it or not.
Yeah, well, I would agree with that.
It
would
benefits
say,
everybody.
Yeah, unitization doesn't make sense.
Any other discussion, questions?
We have a presentation we want to show here. We're trying to figure out which one it is. Let's see it.
And I don't have the rules with me on the spacing. Obviously, gas is spaced at 640 acres right now, but there is the ability in the language, I don't recall the specific language, for the commission to establish, other spacing, but I'm not sure if it's just as simple as, okay, we've talked about it, everybody's kind of in agreement, so yeah, let's do it, or if we actually have to do something else. I'm not sure what we do, so.
Mr. Constancius brought a flash drive and has something on the screen. I wasn't aware that he was going to bring this. Dale,
Is there any confidential information?
No, there's no confidential. And I brought in some displays to share with the committee to provide some visualization. Dale, what I put on the screen is I took my associate Andrew Payton and we've taken a example of a braided stream on the north slope of Alaska. It's called the Colville River, and it's used as a modern analog, and it's been extensively studied by modern sedimentologists. And I just brought it up to help people kind of visualize the nature of the problem, because it shows a modern active channel or channels, because they call braided rivers because they tend to have channels that migrate. And then we've superimposed a section grid broken into 40-acre spacing. And then we've just as a schematic, we've posted the wells that we've drilled at Pinadome. And so for the group at large, you'll see a 4-section area, and on that there's 7 wells that have been drilled by Ranger. And you'll notice in section 34, those wells had no Shinnerup sands within them, and they would be what's called in the overbank. So I'm showing them is the floodplain. And then we had one very good well, that the well, you'll see a radius around it, the 31-1 in section 33, and that well was a significant gas producer, and it's shown as being within the main channel of the braided stream complex. But nearby, less than 1,000 feet away, or about 1,000 feet away, the 33-2 had no sand within that same interval. And on this, I'm showing that there's kind of a stranded area between 2 active channels. So anyway, just to help the group envision what this looks like, this is kind of what could be happening in the subsurface at Pinadome.
Yeah, well, that's predictable.
And then what we were talking about, for instance, on the 31-1, what you'd like to do then is just to offset it in the adjoining, quarter sections around it, or 40-acre sections around it.
Yeah, the concept is good. This is Dale. So I think the commission should approve this. Now we may want to limit the approval to drill on 40-acre spacing to a certain leasehold or a certain section or a certain number of sections. Can you limit the area that this would be applied to?
question for you.
Yeah, that is Tony Hines with Ranger again. Yeah, that is kind of the question on the table. I mean, we have 40,000 acre, or 45,000 acres of leases out there where, I'll give you an example for our fracking, our stimulation, permit, APP permit with the ADEQ. We actually got the permission to do stimulation for the area where our acreage is at for the Shinnerump specifically. I think if, from our standpoint, we would be looking at for the Shinnerump in our area of our acreage, please approve to where we can drill them on 40s as needed to develop it. Would probably be my preference of how we requested it, not just one or two sections. Otherwise, we're going to be back here at the commission every time we step out another section. So.
That's what I was going to suggest. Let's look at it in sort of a regional context.
Yeah, or maybe we could say, Apache and Navajo counties. I think is where most of the activity for potential for Shinnerump and okay. I'm just asking for some broad. Come on, Dale. So.
You need to define it based upon your leasehold.
Okay.
Any discussion on this?
Yeah, quick point, Bill Feyerabend. So what the other condition we'll put on it is it's to the base of the Shinnerup. This cannot be used for anything lower stratigraphically.
Yeah, Shinnerup formation only is all we're asking for.
Shinnerup formation, period.
That's good, Bill. That would be a limitation.
Yeah.
Dennis?
Well, trying to
107E.
the 107E said the commission may grant exceptions to regular locations only after notice and hearing. That's the operative phrase, only after notice and hearing. You're asking, basically, if I understand it, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but you're asking for the commission to grant you permission to drill a lot of wells without those notice and hearings. Is that right?
Consider this. I mean, we're in the hearing. It's been noticed. We're discussing it, and then that would have qualified for that general language like that to establish a spacing for a particular
We're not
zone.
having a public hearing now, though. We're having a public meeting.
Okay.
And I'm not required to notice anything more than 24 hours in advance. Public hearing is 15 days.
Good.
And I had a conversation with Mr. Zeiss subsequent to when you and I first talked about this. And that's where he was stuck on it.
And we didn't really come here expecting somebody to approve this. We actually did want to kind of find out what should we do to get this done, and maybe.
Was it possible that you can just come in with a package of a slew of wells and the commission approves them, and then if you don't drill them, you don't drill them, or if you need a time extension, you write me a quick note that I can do, within 180 days and not go through the thing we did with the 9-1. If you came in with a package of 50 wells, and if that's going to take you 3 years to figure out what you want to drill in that, you get the extensions as you need them from me. But come in with a package for a hearing of, I'm just throwing out 50. I don't know if it would be 50 or not, but would that be workable? You come out with a big package rather than piecemeal it like we've been doing. You've been developing this area, more and more, so that you get a better idea of where you want those wells, so you should be able to come up with a bigger package of what you need to do.
Yeah, this is Dale.
Would that be
Go ahead, Dale.
or not?
As I think about this, it would only allow a spacing change. Each of the wells that would then be pursued would have to follow the normal permitting process.
Well, that's right. But I'd be cranking out permits over the next several weeks after one of these hearings.
The commission may grant, this is Frank Thorwald, exceptions to the regular location specific in subsections A, B, and C only after notice is hearing. On one specifically, applications for exception shall fully state the reasons why the exception is necessary and shall include a plat prepared and certified by a registered surveyor bearing the surveyor's certificate number showing all the complete drilling and permit wells on the property and all adjoining surrounding properties and wells.
Is there another rule, though, that specifically talks about spacing? I mean, the section that actually establishes the spacing, and that's where it actually says that.
That's
F.
that's R-10. That's R-12-7-107. That's the rule.
Okay.
And A, B, C, and D talk about those spacing requirements. E is how you get the exceptions.
Okay, so when it gets down to the E, the structure, sorry I didn't bring that with me,
Yeah,
but it
lawyers
actually
always,
says you go
lawyers
through
always
here.
read at the bottom and work
Yes,
their way up to
okay.
the top.
Okay.
We want to know the exceptions before the rule.
So 107B is talking about the spacing for gas wells.
Right. Is there anything there that says we could get an
Usually
exception to the
60
spacing?
feet from any boundary of the drilling unit,
Right.
and you're asking for exception to that.
For the Shinnerup zone only, yeah, to put it on 40 acres.
I don't think the rule contemplates the stratigraphy.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. But, so would you be revealing too much kind of confidential information to come in with big packages of wells?
No.
Applications?
Go ahead and click on.
Please identify you.
Kurt Constanius. So I'm asking Dennis to go ahead and, there's a practical aspect to this. So just go ahead, next slide. Next one. Next one. Okay, so in the lower left corner there, so Dale, we're looking at a map where we've superimposed a land grid on a hypothetical Colville River slide beneath us, and it shows an active channel and then the floodplain areas.
That's an excellent analog too.
Yeah, it is.
And the so within that, you'll see a black square in each of the 4 sections shown there, and basically we have a rectangle that's well, I guess it's less than 1,000 feet on each side from the center of the section. It's 980 feet. So that's the current spacing limitation right now. So if we were to drill 4 wells in those 4 sections, we'd be potentially condemning a number of those sections, with the exception of the one in the lower right, which would be a producing well. Now, as a practical matter, what we'd like to do, you can go to the next slide. So we have let's see here, can you zoom out too? Zoom out again. There you go.
Okay.
Maybe once more. So now I'm just showing in the northeast quarter of a section. We drill up, for instance, a well within a modern channel. So I show on the index of the Colville River, we have a well centered within the channel body, and that would most likely be a productive well.
This one here.
Yes, correct. It's the green dot in the lower left part of the slide.
Right
So
there.
then if our next step would be to offset that well in pretty much all directions. So you can go to the next slide. And so then you would drill these wells, and we'd see that in the northeast part we have 2 dry holes because they're in the floodplain, and now we're starting to be able to map. And in a way, it's kind of like a game of Battleship, right? But it's more systematic. And so then And then from those wells, then we do another set of iterations. So go ahead and guess the next slide. And so now we're attempting to follow the channel. In some directions we drill dry holes, but now we can see it's kind of north-south trending. So kind of the practical answer to your thing is we don't necessarily know which package of wells that we would want to drill until we're actively within the drilling program. So it would be more beneficial for us to have an area that's defined where there's this, Shinnerup, I guess permission to drill Shinnerups on 40-acre spacing. So if there's within a township and range or set of sections, then we can pursue this methodology for trying to exploit the gas that may occur in the Shinnerup.
Okay.
Go ahead.
That's all very logical.
Yeah, Bill Feyerabend. I would think that it would be possible to produce a map where you could put your current ideas on geology. And I'm used to thinking in township range sections, the public land survey system. Where you would have this map with the township range and section would show that grid, place your interpretation of broadly, the geology, and you can say what's reasonable. Are these sections, townships, and ranges, could we apply within these for this? And that way we're not giving you permission for 2 counties or anything. It's very specific for testing and very specific testing the Shinnerup. And that gives you a lot of permission for a lot of work. And ideas evolve. They always do. And then as in the future, at some point in the future, you're not always having to come back, but at some point in the future, you can come back and present essentially the same map updated with your, the data you have in your thoughts, and say we also would like permission in these section, township, and ranges to do that. That to me would be a very logical way to come to us and not say permission for a county, but present your a map showing your ideas, township ranges, sections that you want, and then we can either like it or not like it.
So let me ask a question.
Go ahead, Dennis.
To clarify in my own words, what I think you're suggesting is they would come to us with a map just like this, proposing up to 23 to 25 wells within a section or a couple of sections. They wouldn't necessarily have an application for each one of those, but they would submit applications to me subsequently, but you're just saying the commission, or you're suggesting the commission might try to approve based on the map and the geologic justification for it, but they're not specifically approving every one of those dots, green, red, white, whatever, yellow. Is that right?
Bill Feierabend, where I'm thinking is the particular point we're addressing right now is give them permission to go to a 40-acre spacing in these sections, townships, and ranges based on the information you're providing us. And that can always be amended in the future, but that gives you, and it doesn't have to be one section, it might be 10 sections that you can reasonably look at now and say within this broad area I'd like to do 40-acre spacings, my choice, as I develop data. I mean, I could understand and accept that.
Yeah. Tony Hines. Oh, sorry.
This is Dale. Bill, you stated it very well. That's my feeling. We should look at this beyond just sections. And if they have a whole leasehold of I forgot how many thousand acres, then it should apply to their whole leasehold.
This is Frank Thorwald. I would propose that what I'm thinking about is that they prepare something, that we table this to our next meeting. They prepare something for us in advance along these lines and present it to us in advance of the next meeting so we can discuss it and rule on it.
That's a good idea.
That would be my motion, but I would add to it that they look at our Rule 107E and make sure that they follow those guidelines that are set forth in the rule.
So, did we have a motion on that then?
That was my motion.
Okay. Second on that motion?
Second.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 All opposed? The motion carries. It's tabled to the next meeting. Thanks. And you'll present it to us. The next one is number 5, Arizona Energy Partners. Dennis?
All right, well drilling activity. I would suggest we just go in order. Mr. LeBlanc still here?
Right here.
Right here.
Good thing he's not a.
I don't know if I'm really still here, but
Dennis, we need to
Anyway.
get you a new set of glasses.
Yeah. Well, I got another pair here, but I can't see with those.
Okay. Dennis?
Request to renew the NCOG 17-1, which has been shut in, and also confidentiality status. This I'm actually posing as a question. I wanted Mr. LeBlanc to explain to us what is intended by this long range and what what you want to ask the commission for so that they can rule on it.
Well, we had a conversation a few days ago about, I guess I had a brain freeze thinking Louisiana and not Arizona. But instead of the 2-year confidentiality, I agreed to the 1 year. That's the rule.
Oh, no, we're talking about the 17-1 here.
Okay. Oh, all right.
For more background for the commission, on the 17-1, that was a well that was drilled by Holbrook Energy in 2005 and received a approval for temporary abandonment, which expired, according to the records that I have, and again, I'm kind of faced with the same situation as with the Suncor wells. According to the records I have, that temporary abandonment expired in 2006, and there doesn't seem to be any indication of much activity at all until 2014, when Mr. Blanc submitted some more testing data that I think was held in confidence for the year per the rule. And then I think it was this well that you submitted some more data again to me about February of last year. Is that right? This correct well? Asking for confidentiality on that. So the confidentiality on the latest submittal that Mr. LeBlanc submitted to me in February of last year is now up for either renewal or will just be released to the public. And when I say released to the public, it's if somebody wants to ask for a copy of the file. But the other question I have is for Mr. LeBlanc is, did you want to renew your temporary abandonment status? Because the temporary abandonment, as I understand from the well, file, it seems to indicate that that expired in 2006. Permission for temporary abandonment.
Well, yes, I do want to, extend that status of temporary abandonment.
How long? Up to 5 years, correct?
Well, a year would be fine at this time. And I think I mentioned to you that once I get off this well, I'll file that paperwork.
Frank Thorwald here. I saw we have two things as I see it before us: the extension, the shut-in status, and the confidentiality for the material submitted last February. If we want to extend that, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want to extend that confidentiality?
We will. There's some additional work we're going to do on that hole. Go back in, do a squeeze job, and
that would be. Go ahead, Dale.
What's the location of that well? I don't have a map here.
Dale, I think I sent you a map yesterday that shows the relative position of the 17-1 to the two wells that we were discussing in the public hearing. It was a Google Earth or a Google Map thing, and there's 4 red dots strung across the middle of the page, and the 17-1 I think was the farthest west positioned well.
Okay. Well, I apparently didn't receive that. I haven't seen it. But I guess that's really irrelevant because that location is not too concerning.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay. Shall we take each one of these at a time? Do we have any motion to extend the confidentiality specifically for the data submitted last February?
I move that.
Second.
Extend that for 1 year.
Which well is this for?
Which well is this for specifically?
NZOG 17-1.
Okay, very good. So we have a second. All in favor say aye.
Actually, before we have a vote, can we have a little more wording on what we're voting on?
Clarification.
The motion before, just for clarification, it is for well NZOG 17-1, and the vote is to extend the temporary shut-in status?
No, the confidentiality of the material that was submitted last February.
Well, I thought they were both together.
No, we're separating
Separate.
these.
And we also need to know for what period of time we're extending that for.
For
Is it
1 year.
1 year.
1 year.
And the expiration date would be effective 1 year from today's date? Is that how it works?
When did the last confidentiality period end?
17th of February.
2/17/2/18.
Yes.
So it'd go 2/17/19 then.
Okay.
Bill, since this has been modified, well, first of all, Dale, did you accept those modifications?
Yes, I do.
Bill, you have made a second. Do you accept the modifications as well?
I do.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion on this? All in favor of this motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. The ayes carry it. Confidentiality has been extended for 1 year till February 17th of 2019. The second portion of this, the shut-in status, extending that.
I'd like to.
I move we extend that to the same date of the expiration of the confidentiality statement.
Okay, Dale, we have some discussion from Dennis on this.
So I just want to clarify to the board that the way the rule is phrased, an operator has to make a decision whether they want to temporarily abandon a well or plug it or put it in production. If Mr. LeBlanc has more testing to do, he's got to do that within the next year, and his temporary abandonment status as proposed would expire on the 17th of next year, at which point he's got to make a decision to either go into production or plug it. The rule allows for up to 5 years.
We've
I just
exceeded
want you
that.
to be understanding that, we may be revisiting this again, or do you want to just give him enough time if he needs more time for whatever else? Otherwise, the rule says he's got to take an action and make a decision to do something at the end of that 1 year.
Dale?
And he's had the luxury of temporary abandonment default or de facto since 2006 anyway, so.
Well,
1 year.
1 year.
I see no problem with extending the shut-in status
Okay.
for an additional year.
Just wanted to clarify, that's all.
Any further discussion on this?
Yeah, procedurally, how do we run it, how do we go back to an order that lapsed 12 years ago?
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know that you can.
Yeah.
I guess my point is that he's had 12 years to do other testing or whatever, and I'm just putting that in the context of what this well has been sitting out there and doing.
What's the AG's office state
I'd have
about
to read a
this?
little more right now to come up with
Not really leaning in the direction of any negative connotations here. I'm just pointing out that I think the commission ought to consider that it's about time for the operator to make a decision on the well. And I would support another temporary abandonment if you want to do it for a year.
Let's do the thought
We
is
don't want
do
to
it
keep
for a
doing this
year.
and doing this and doing this.
Because now you have new jurisdiction on the vote today. Do it for a year, and at the year he either comes back with a request to extend again, or he plug it abandon, or he goes in production.
But do we have the authority to do that after this 12 years?
I believe you do.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree.
So there is a motion on the table Dale, do you need to modify that at all? Or is it fine the way you've just stated to extend it for 1 year?
That's fine.
And this is for which well?
The NZOG 17-1.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Any further discussion? I would, this is Stephen Cooper, I would just point out that under our rules, 12-7-125C, before an approved time frame for a temporarily abandoned or shut-in well expires, the operator shall return the well to beneficial use under a plan approved by the Commission, permanently plug or abandon the well, or apply for an extension to temporarily abandon or shut in the well. And it does go on. And my concern is that if we do this again, I don't want to come back and have a situation where this expires and we're asking to breathe life into something that shouldn't have any life, brought back to it.
Yeah, Steve. I think, Stephen. I think this is probably falls into the category of our revising our rules, which are way out of date.
Stephen, do you have any other thoughts?
Just that the concern, my concern is that once it expired, it expired. I don't think we can go back and make it retroactive, but.
The AG's office feels
Hold
we can.
on, let me read one more time.
One moment here while we get.
Oh, and I'm not disagreeing with Mr. Zeiss. I have confidence in his advice to the board.
You didn't hear me giggle.
One moment while this is being reviewed.
Mr. Cooper, and the alternative, would you then push them into plug and abandon? I guess that is what's the next step? Or if you'd rather do this in executive session, we can go in executive session for a few seconds.
The concern I have is basically that that the temporary abandonment status expired in 2006. We were sitting here 12 years later, and obviously it does not appear that there's any imminent issue out there that we have to deal with as a commission, but I just wonder how many times in the future we're going to revisit an issue where someone wants to go back and basically have us revisit an order that administratively lapsed and have us correct it.
That's true.
I would be really leery about, I think given the circumstances here, I don't think there'd be a problem with approving the motion as presented. But I do think at the end of the 1 year period, I just think that we need to either need to fish or cut bait on this well.
What if we modify the motion to say that at the end of 1 year where there will be no more extensions and that they either have to put it in production or abandon it? I mean, to plug it.
I would hate to if we're going to do this, I'd hate to box them in a corner where they've got to do one or the other, because there could be some facts out there that are unknown to everyone. But I do think that before the time period at which this where this 1 year time period expires, we need to have an update, and we need to have a report and have some clear discussion as to what path we're going to take from this point forward.
Completely agree.
This is Bill Feierabend. Can you put a condition on that it's for 1 year and can be renewed with advanced discussion or application or something like that? In other words, if there's no communication at the end of 1 year, that's it. But there has to be communication and working with us for the points that there may be things out there that we don't really see right now.
Well, this is Dale. The motion to extend for 1 year, to me, implies that that's the end of the extension.
Any further discussion on this?
Okay. At least in regards to my thinking on giving the 1 year time frame is, and the goal of the commission is to develop gas resources, not restrict. And 1 year seems a reasonable period of time. However, Mr. Cooper's points are well taken. Thank you.
We have a motion on the table and seconded to extend for the OG17-1 1 more year. So unless there's other discussion, I'd like to call a vote on that. All in favor of the motion as it stands, say aye.
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 All the opposed say nay. Motion carries. You have your 1 year extension. Moving on to number 6, Blackstone exploration.
Did we?
We skipped one.
Oh, we did.
The 16-1.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
the
yeah,
one
sorry.
where
Well,
Back to the 16. I
Yeah, the
apologize.
second hollow bullet or number 5.
that's where in error I asked for 2, and it's just 1.
Yeah, so you can automatically get 1, and so
Right.
just before the end of the 1 year for the 16-1, which is the well that they're currently drilling, you can
Right.
come before the board and ask for an extension if you want.
Right.
Since we have you here, can you give us a progress report on the status of the 16-1?
Did you want to take a vote first, and then we'll move to that?
I don't think we need to vote on it. The rule allows it to do it. I just wanted it to be on the table for discussion.
Okay.
There's no need for a vote.
So he gets a 1-year extension?
He
Yeah,
got
I
the
can do
1-year
that
extension.
administratively.
Okay.
He just has to ask for it, which he already has.
Okay.
So, status of the
Yeah,
16-1?
I've been going back and forth with them at the well. I really need to get up there, but we're pretty much through the salt now. Getting close to being through the salt, and then the problem area.
You about ready to TD, is that what you're
Oh,
saying?
no, we'd have another 2,500 feet to go.
Okay.
And but all's well up there now. It's cold, windy. There's some snow. We got some rain. The road condition is like a superhighway now. Well, you've been up there since I've been up there, so it's
Superhighway, not soup.
no soup. No.
Gordon, I have a question. If you can you can't answer it. I think in some of your correspondence you mentioned that that's located adjacent to a critical fault.
Yes, sir.
Is that well established as is a surface exposure of the fault?
Yes, there's a surface exposure, and we've flown a drone all the way down the fault. I can supply that to y'all. That's not a problem.
Presumably you're on the upside of the fault?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know what the displacement on the fault is?
Off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, okay. That's to be determined.
Yes.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Mr. LeBlanc. Are you a geologist?
Yes.
Registered geologist?
Not registered, no, sir.
4-year degree?
I went through all my geology, but I didn't get the degree.
Okay, what school?
Centenary College.
Thank you very much.
Centenary.
Spell it.
CENTENARY.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions or discussion?
Not on this one.
Then let's move on
Let's move to Blackstone.
to Blackstone number 6. Thank you.
Right.
The only reason I'm still here, and it's probably going to be a moot point, I was called to assist Trent with the documentation.
In regards to, well, yeah, let me give the background to that. So on item number 6 of the agenda, status summary of airline activity. First of all, Blackstone had gotten a notice of opportunity to correct for a number of deficiencies out on those sites. They have addressed everything that was in the letter. We're to the point now in the letter where the next step is for the commission to approve temporary abandonment status. They would like 5 years for the 5 wells that I did those inspections on that we've had a lot of dialogue with. And we're back to the same point that we've been with the discussion of the previous 2 wells, the Suncor wells and this one, and that is that Blackstone has to provide evidence of cement bond log, that the cement integrity is intact behind the casing, and that there is casing integrity in regards to pressure integrity. And Blackstone has not been able to do that. I can't find in any of the data that they've submitted to me that they've ever done those kind of tests, cement bond logs, or any kind of casing integrity pressure tests. They'd like to temporarily abandon it for 5 years. My concern is that given the depth of at least one of those wells, I think they've gone into the Coconino, there may be some potential for communication of some of the brinier water from the Coconino to communicate with freshwater aquifers either up high of the Coconino or in other strata. And I would feel a lot better if we had some kind of cement bond log to demonstrate the integrity of the 5 wells. And that seems to be where the rub is.
Frank Thorwald here. Didn't they just drill these in the last within the last 5 years?
They completed their drilling in 2016, summer of 2016.
And the when they started was on these 5.
Well, the first one was started
January, so it would have been January 2 years ago.
So it's all been recent, so they should have records if they did it.
Well, they've submitted everything as I understand that they've done, and I'm not sure they've run a submit monologue.
Okay.
And so I think the commission should get some kind of assurance that it was a good cement job and the casing is good quality and can hold up for the 5 years of temporary abandonment. So Mr. Bonanno has reached out to Mr. LeBlanc in some fashion to provide some interpretation of data or something. I don't know. Go ahead.
Gordon, go ahead.
Oh, Carmen just called, and with Trent, we've been picking up some drill collars and so forth from their yard up in Holbrook, and they're kind of in a state of flux right now anyway, so he just asked if we would assist him in completing those forms, and they couldn't find some of the logs and so forth, and I spoke with Dennis. I can come down here and go through those and fill out the reports for him. I told him I'd do that.
So, but are you going to be providing an interpretation of casing integrity and cement integrity?
Yeah, and we've already had the engineer up on the well and the well site geologist taking a look at that for him. We're just doing it as a favor. There's no relationship there. They're struggling with getting that in, so that's why we're doing that. And by the way, Rick, I'm third generation oil and gas. I was on my first drilling rig when I was 6 weeks old. Got a picture, don't really remember it, and I've drilled about 150 wells that I've done the workups on. Found my first oil field at 16.
Okay. Well, forgive me, I maybe be belaboring the point, but I'll just read the rule here. 125, temporary abandoned shut-in wells, subsection B. An operator may temporarily abandon or shut in a well for up to 5 years if the operator demonstrates to a quorum of the commission of future beneficial use of the well. I don't think we have a question about that. And submits a sundry notice to the commission containing the following information, and this is what I'm waiting for. Number 1, evidence of casing integrity as required in a citation of section 112 of the rule, including a complete description of the current casing, cementing, and perforation record of the well. There is some evidence of perforation. I don't know anything about the cementing. Number 2 is the stimulation and cement squeeze record and complete data on results of any other well tests performed to date. And number 3 is all other well data. So the sticking point I have is just some assurance that the cement job is a good job on all the wells. The rest of it, I think, is good enough data that he submitted. I don't have to worry about it.
And
that's where you're going to provide.
And they're
some
just
kind of
having
assistance.
difficulty going through and completing the
But does that mean we're going to be able to get that information on the cementing job and how effective it was?
Right. Yeah, we're looking at all that, and I think we've probably got another week or 10 days, and then I would come down and
Any discussion on this? I would make a motion, Frank Thorwald here, that we table this until our next meeting to allow for them to provide the documentation that we need to be able to extend give it shut-in status.
okay.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion on the motion?
The next meeting will be April 6th.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say nay. It has been carried to the next meeting. Next item on the agenda, number 7, a report by the Oil and Gas Administrator.
Many weeks ago now, I sent a draft letter that will be signed by the commission chairman that will be sent to the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission requesting a peer review of our rules. This would be the first step in the long process of getting the rules revised, amended, whatever. After I got all the input, after the commission got all the input from the AZOGCC, then I would be able to approach, if it's still in existence, a request for an exception to the governor's moratorium on rules
new rules, rulemaking, and so forth. But the first step is to get AZOGCC's peer review, and as I've indicated before, that's a process that could take up to 6 months. What they asked for was a letter with some detail, which is what I sent to y'all, I guess it was in January, to review and comment. And I've received some comments from Mr. Thorwald this morning. I didn't know if there needed to be a discussion, but I'm asking for a vote to approve it so I can finalize it with the changes Mr. Thorwald wants, and he can sign it. And I can mail it out as soon as possible. So,
Commissioners, your thoughts?
Yeah, this is Dale. I think I reviewed that letter and I didn't see any problem with it. So I think the commission should go ahead and authorize Dennis to send that.
Let me jump in, Frank Thorwald here. I did make comments on it. I would think that Dennis should put my comments in and then send it back out to everybody. And if everybody agrees with it, and there's nobody that disagrees with my comments, then we'll allow him to go ahead and send it out. But if there's a disagreement, then we should extend this over to the next meeting for approval. Does anybody?
Dennis, Frank, this is Dale. A question to you personally: have you talked to anybody in the governor's office recently about maybe supporting our membership fee?
No.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's just out of the question, but maybe we could look for some industry support to pay for our fee. I've thought about that, but I don't have those contacts.
Okay.
As you know, Lee Allison used to pay that out of his research funds.
I know.
And prior to that, many years ago, several governors that I've served under found those dollars to go to pay for our membership fee. So we're really negligent now in not doing that.
I know. I appreciate your comments. So far, nothing's happened in that area.
All right, thank you.
Should we move on to Plains?
well, that's the motion then, or what?
Does anybody, any other comments? Would everybody agree with my thoughts, or do we need?
I'd say just take Frank's corrections and submit it.
I'll second that motion.
That was a motion, Dale?
Oh, is it necessary? Yeah, that is a motion then.
Okay, then we have a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, the motion carries.
Okay, good. Plains LPG, again, sent out a notice of opportunity to correct. Their major issue was the failure of a device that was kind of a backup safety valve system. In short, they got right on it, installed a new valve or safety system, replaced the one that was defective. It's all done way ahead of schedule. And I'll go out and probably have a look at that, as well as observe the workover and MIT tests that are going to be occurring on cavern number 3 starting March 5th. I've got the sundry notice for that notice and everything. So that's just an update. Same things seem to be going on with Plains LPG site.
Anything, any other questions on this or discussion? Not hearing any, we'll move on to the report by the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission Chairman on hydraulic fracturing prohibition. And the last I've heard on this, has not gotten out of committee unless somebody else has any further information. Not hearing anything or any further discussion, let's move on to the minutes of our previous meetings for January 12th, the executive session, the public hearing, and the public meeting. Is there any changes in those minutes? Any discussion on those minutes? Not hearing any. I make a motion for approval of all 3. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed say no. Nay. The motion carries. All the minutes are approved. Call to the public. Do we have anybody that wants to say anything? Please come forward.
Tony Hines with Ranger. I have two questions. First one on item 6 regarding confidentiality of the 16-1 well. Is that confidentiality limited anyway to just the information for oil? But is the well was only spaced for oil, or what would happen?
Here's the problem. You're asking a question. Under call to the public, the board can provide no answers. So the suggestion may be, when you're done with your comment, is that you request the board put it on calendar for a future date so that we don't run afoul of the public meeting laws.
Right. So that was a question, and if you could address that for the next one.
Do you have
'cause I
any
know
further
you-
questions you want to address online in the future?
Yeah, the other one is what is the position on the State Bill 1371 about the hydraulic fracturing? Is the commission actively opposing that because it's against? Well, I mean, we would consider that it's against kind of the extra development, or what type of activities is the commission doing with regard to that law? So
Can't answer the question, but you
I
can
know.
request to be put on calendar.
We'll put it on the calendar.
okay, thank you.
Okay. Is there anybody else from the public? We'll move on to number 7 then. Review of and consideration of future agenda items, which we just talked about a few. Is there any other items we want to attach to the agenda?
Yes, we're going to be, well, the 3 that we've got that I understand it are the 2 questions just posed by Mr. Hines, but also consideration of temporary abandonment status for Blackstone.
Yes.
Consider a vote, et cetera, on that. I think those are the only 3 for sure right now.
Okay.
Anything else from anybody? Any of the others?
Spacing.
Oh, yeah.
Spacing.
Okay, forget.
Okay. Anything else? Not hearing anything. Is there any announcements? Not hearing any announcements. We are adjourned.
Frank, I will take a look at that. You had it, and I'll be back in touch.